He doesn't recognize the woman I've become. Good. I'm standing outside his door right now, 6 months after he destroyed my life, wearing a black suit that cost more than the rent he refused to pay me back, holding a briefcase that contains everything he thought he buried when he changed those locks. My hand is steady as I reach for the doorbell, which is strange because 6 months ago, my hands wouldn't stop shaking for 3 weeks straight. 6 months ago, I was a different person entirely. Someone who believed that love meant trust, and trust meant safety, and safety meant home. I was wrong about all of it, and the wrongness of those beliefs nearly killed me. But standing here now, I realize that sometimes you have to die to be reborn. And the woman who emerges from the ashes doesn't always look like the one who burned. Let me take you back to before, to the ordinary world where I was just another 25-year-old woman trying to build a life in America, trying to make something meaningful out of the chaos of early adulthood. I worked as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup called Vertex Solutions in downtown Seattle, making just enough to split rent on a decent apartment with the man I thought I'd marry someday. We'd met at a 4th of July barbecue 2 years earlier, one of those perfect summer days where everyone drinks too much beer and eats too many hot dogs, and the fireworks feel like they're exploding just for you. He was charming in that effortless way some men have, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room, even when you're surrounded by 50 people all competing for attention. We fell into a relationship the way you fall into water on a hot day, easy and refreshing and necessary. The apartment was nothing special, just a 2-bedroom in Capitol Hill with hardwood floors that creaked and windows that didn't quite close all the way in winter, but it was ours. I'd hung string lights across the living room and filled the windowsills with succulents I bought at Pike Place Market every Sunday, and we had this ritual where we'd make breakfast together on Saturday mornings, blueberry pancakes from scratch with real maple syrup, and everything felt like it was building toward something solid. I ignored the red flags because I wanted to believe in the story we were writing together. I ignored how he'd criticize my friends until I stopped seeing them as much. I ignored how he'd make jokes about my weight when I reached for seconds at dinner. I ignored how he controlled the bank account we'd opened together, the one where my paychecks went because he said it was easier to manage our finances that way, more efficient, more adult. The day everything shattered started like any other Tuesday in March. I'd gone to work early for a presentation, spent 9 hours in back-to-back meetings, and stopped at Safeway on the way home to pick up ingredients for the chicken stir-fry he'd requested the night before. I remember the specific feeling of my keys not working in the lock, that confused moment where you think maybe you're using the wrong key, even though you've used the same key 1,000 times before. I tried again. Nothing. I tried the deadbolt. Different key. I stood there in the hallway with my grocery bags growing heavy in my arms, my phone buzzing with a text message that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. The locks are changed. Your things are in storage unit 47 at Secure Space on Aurora Avenue. The key is with the building manager. We're done. Don't contact me again. I read it 3 times before my brain could process what was happening. I called him immediately and it went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I knocked on the door, softly at first and then harder, and then I was pounding on it with my fists, my voice breaking as I shouted his name, and the neighbor across the hall opened their door and asked if everything was okay, and I couldn't even form words to answer. The building manager, a tired-looking woman named Sandra, who'd always been kind to me, came upstairs with this expression of deep discomfort and handed me a key attached to a Secure Space keychain and said she was sorry, but he'd paid through the end of the month for the unit, and legally there was nothing she could do. The storage unit was exactly what you'd imagine. A 5x10 concrete box with a rolling metal door, and inside was my entire life thrown together without care or thought. My clothes were stuffed into garbage bags. My books were in cardboard boxes that had gotten wet at some point, pages warped and covers damaged. My grandmother's quilt, the one she'd made by hand before she died, was crumpled at the bottom of everything like it meant nothing. I sat on the cold floor of that storage unit and cried until I threw up in a corner, and then I cried some more because I'd just thrown up in the only place I had left that could be called mine. But the physical displacement was just the beginning. He'd been busy destroying me in other ways while I was at work earning money that apparently meant nothing. He'd posted on social media about his crazy ex-girlfriend who wouldn't leave him alone, who'd become obsessed and unstable, who'd threatened him when he tried to end things peacefully. None of it was true, but the lies spread like wildfire through our social circle, and suddenly friends I'd known for years were looking at me with suspicion and pity. My phone filled with messages asking if I was okay, if I needed help, if I'd considered talking to someone professional about my mental health. The betrayal of having my reality rewritten by someone I'd trusted with my vulnerability was somehow worse than losing the apartment. I spent the first week in my car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a broken passenger window I'd covered with plastic and duct tape. I'd park behind the Starbucks on Broadway, where they had Wi-Fi and I could use the bathroom, and I'd sit there scrolling through the lies he was spreading, watching our mutual friends like and comment and share his version of events. I'd go to work and pretend everything was fine, touching up my makeup in the office bathroom to hide the evidence of another sleepless night, and then I'd leave at 5 and have nowhere to go. I ate whatever was cheapest, dollar menu items from McDonald's and day-old sandwiches from 7-Eleven, and I kept thinking that if I could just talk to him, just explain, just make him see reason, everything would go back to normal. I tried. God, I tried. I sent him emails that he never answered. I left voicemails that disappeared into the void. I showed up at Vertex Solutions during my lunch break one day because I knew he had a meeting in the building next door. And when he saw me walking toward him, his face went cold and hard, and he told me that if I didn't stop harassing him, he'd file for a restraining order. Harassing him. The word hung in the air between us like poison, and I realized in that moment that he wasn't just leaving me, he was erasing me, rewriting our entire history so that I became the villain in a story where I'd only ever tried to love him. Rock bottom came on a Saturday night 2 weeks after he changed the locks. I was parked outside a Denny's on Aurora, eating a Grand Slam breakfast at 9 p.m. because it was the only meal I could afford that day, and I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize myself. My eyes were hollow. My skin was gray. I'd lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. I looked like a ghost, and I realized that's exactly what he wanted, for me to fade away into nothing, to become so small and so broken that I'd simply disappear from his life and his conscience entirely. I sat there with my cold eggs and my weak coffee, and I wanted to disappear. I wanted to stop existing, because existing hurt too much, and the pain was relentless and everywhere, and I couldn't see any way out. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the waitress who refilled my coffee without asking, and gave me a kind smile that suggested she knew exactly what kind of night I was having. Maybe it was the song playing over the diner speakers, some old country ballad about a woman who'd survived worse. Maybe it was just that I'd finally hit a bottom so hard there was nowhere left to fall. I pulled out my phone, and instead of checking his social media for the 100th time that day, I opened a note and I started making a list of everything he'd done, every provable lie, every piece of evidence I could gather, the bank account he'd emptied, the apartment lease with both our names, the text messages I'd saved, the friends who might still tell the truth if asked directly. That's when she appeared. Not literally at the Denny's, but the next morning at a coffee shop in Fremont, where I'd gone to use the Wi-Fi and continue my documentation. I was sitting in the corner with my laptop and my phone and stacks of printed bank statements, trying to figure out if I had any legal recourse, when an older woman in an expensive blazer sat down at the table next to mine and asked if I was all right. I must have looked terrible because her face was full of genuine concern, and something about her directness broke through my defenses, and I started telling her everything, this complete stranger in a coffee shop, and she listened without interrupting until I'd emptied myself of the whole story. Her name was Patricia Reeves, and she was an attorney who specialized in tenant rights and defamation cases, and she told me about her own story of betrayal 20 years earlier, a husband who'd done something similar, who'd tried to erase her from their shared life and very nearly succeeded. She said the words that changed everything, that lit a fire in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Revenge is a dish best served legal. She offered to help me document everything properly, to build a case if I wanted one, and more than that, she offered me a framework for understanding what had happened, not as my failure, but as his crime. She gave me her card and told me to call her office on Monday. And when I tried to ask about her fees, she waved the question away and said we'd figure it out, that some things mattered more than money. I called her Monday morning and started the process of fighting back, of refusing to disappear quietly into the narrative he'd written for me. Patricia connected me with resources I didn't know existed, tenant advocacy groups and legal aid services and support networks for women who'd experienced similar betrayals. I learned that what he'd done was illegal in multiple ways, that changing the locks without proper notice was a violation of tenant law, that emptying our joint account without consent was financial abuse, that his public statements about my mental health could qualify as defamation if I could prove they'd damaged my reputation or my employment prospects. Every piece of information felt like ammunition, like I was building an arsenal out of truth and law, and the simple fact that I deserved better than what he'd given me. If you're finding strength in this story, Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and turn on notifications because this journey gets even more intense. Drop a comment with something like, "This is a powerful story of transformation," and let me know you're here with me. I enrolled in online paralegal courses through Seattle Community College because I wanted to understand the law deeply enough to fight my own battles. And I worked double shifts at a new job I'd found waitressing at a place called the Copper Kettle in Queen Anne, saving every dollar I could. The physical transformation started almost accidentally, a byproduct of walking everywhere because I couldn't afford gas and eating better, because I was cooking my own meals in the tiny studio apartment I'd finally scraped together enough for a deposit on. I cut my hair short in a bathroom with scissors I bought at Walgreens, and the woman looking back at me in the mirror had sharp eyes and a harder jaw and something dangerous in her expression that hadn't been there before. I started going to the gym at 5 a.m. before my paralegal classes, using the guest passes they handed out at the grocery store, and the physical exhaustion helped quiet the mental noise that had been screaming in my head for months. The loneliness was the hardest part. I'd lost most of my friends to his version of events, and the ones who remained weren't sure what to believe, and I was too proud to beg for their faith in me. I spent Friday nights studying tort law and civil procedure while other 25-year-olds were out at bars in Belltown, and sometimes the isolation felt like it would crush me, but I kept going because stopping meant giving him exactly what he wanted. I went to therapy every Wednesday at a sliding scale clinic called Mindful Healing Center, and slowly, session by session, I started to understand that closure doesn't come from other people, that waiting for him to acknowledge what he'd done was giving him power over my healing that he didn't deserve. 3 months after he changed those locks, I passed my paralegal certification exam. 4 months after, Patricia and I filed a civil lawsuit against him for illegal eviction, conversion of property, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. 5 months after, I'd saved enough money to buy the black suit I'm wearing right now, the one that makes me look like I mean business because I do. And 6 months after, almost to the day, I'm standing outside his door with a briefcase full of legal documents and a heart that's finally stopped breaking long enough to start building something new. I stopped crying somewhere along the way. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped hoping he'd apologize or explain or give me the closure I thought I needed. Instead, I started planning, and the planning became purpose, and the purpose became power, and now here I am, transformed entirely, ready to show him exactly who survives when you try to erase someone who refuses to disappear. The apartment I found after those weeks in my car wasn't much, just a 400-square-foot studio in Greenwood, with water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanked like someone was banging pipes together at 3 in the morning. But it was mine in a way nothing had been mine in a long time. I paid the deposit with money I'd earned serving breakfast platters and refilling coffee cups at the Copper Kettle. And the first night I slept there on an air mattress I'd bought at Target, I cried not from sadness but from the profound relief of having a door I could lock from the inside. Rebuilding from absolute zero teaches you things about yourself you never wanted to know, like how much you can endure before breaking, and then how much further you can go after you've already broken into pieces. The paralegal courses consumed my nights and weekends, and I'd sit at the tiny desk I'd assembled from an IKEA flat pack, studying civil procedure and evidence law and legal writing with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Patricia had become more than just my attorney. She'd become a mentor in the truest sense, meeting me for coffee every Thursday morning at a place called Brew Haven near her office downtown, where she'd quiz me on case law and procedural rules and the difference between liable and libel. She never treated me like a victim or a charity case. She treated me like a student with potential, and that faith in my capacity to transform myself into something stronger became the foundation everything else was built on. She told me stories about her own journey, how her ex-husband had tried to paint her as unstable during their divorce, how she'd gone to law school at 42 years old specifically to understand the systems that had failed to protect her, and how helping other women fight back had become her life's purpose. Working with Patricia meant documenting everything with the kind of precision that would hold up in court, and we spent hours going through my bank statements and text messages and social media posts, building a timeline of his behavior that revealed a pattern I hadn't fully seen when I was inside it. The joint account he'd opened in both our names at Pacific Northwest Credit Union showed systematic transfers to his personal account in the weeks before he changed the locks, money that should have been split evenly, but somehow always ended up in his control. We found receipts for the new locks at Greenwood Hardware dated 3 days before he actually used them. Proof of premeditation that contradicted his narrative about making a spontaneous decision to protect himself from my alleged harassment. We collected screenshots of his social media posts where he'd called me obsessive and mentally unstable, posts that friends had sent me even though seeing them felt like swallowing glass, and we cross-referenced them with my work attendance records and therapy notes that proved I'd been functioning and seeking help, rather than spiraling into the chaos he'd described. But the real breakthrough came when Patricia suggested we try to find out if I was the first woman he'd done this to, and I started reaching out through mutual connections and Facebook groups, and anywhere I could think to look for his past relationships. It took weeks of careful detective work and awkward conversations, but eventually I found 3 other women who'd experienced versions of the same story. There was Amanda from Spokane who he'd dated 5 years earlier, before me, who said he'd isolated her from her family and then kicked her out of their shared apartment with 2 days' notice when she started questioning his control over her finances. There was Rebecca from Portland who'd been with him for 8 months and left when he started monitoring her phone and accused her of cheating every time she went out with friends. There was Jennifer from right here in Seattle who'd dated him briefly between Amanda and me, who said she'd gotten out early when she recognized the warning signs because she'd been through it before with someone else. Talking to these women was like looking into alternate timelines of my own life, and we formed a group chat that we darkly joked was our Survivors Club, sharing stories and evidence and encouragement during the moments when any of us wanted to give up. They'd all been too exhausted or too broken to pursue legal action when it happened to them, but they were willing to provide sworn statements for my case, and knowing I wasn't alone in this transformed my anger from something personal and consuming into something cleaner and more purposeful. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about establishing a record that would follow him, that would make it harder for him to do this to the next woman who made the mistake of trusting him. The physical transformation that started as a side effect of poverty and stress became intentional around month 3. I started waking up at 4:30 every morning to go to the YMCA in Northgate before my shift at the Copper Kettle, using the membership I'd gotten on a sliding scale payment plan, and there was something clarifying about pushing my body to its limits on the treadmill and the weight machines while the sun came up over Lake Washington. The exhaustion was different from the bone-deep tiredness of heartbreak. It was earned and clean, and it helped me sleep without dreaming about him. I wasn't trying to become someone new. I was trying to become someone strong enough to carry the weight of what had happened without collapsing under it. And slowly my body started to reflect that internal shift. I changed my hair because looking in the mirror and seeing the woman he'd known felt like being haunted by my own ghost. I went to a cheap salon called Snip and Style on Roosevelt and told the stylist to cut it all off. And when she hesitated, I told her I was serious. And the woman who emerged from that chair with a sharp bob that framed my face differently looked like someone who could walk into a courtroom and demand justice. I bought clothes from Goodwill and Salvation Army, professional pieces that didn't match my waitress salary but matched the person I was becoming. And I learned to carry myself differently, shoulders back and chin up and eyes that met people directly instead of sliding away. The armor wasn't just external, it was internal too, built from therapy sessions and legal knowledge, and the growing certainty that I deserved better than what I'd accepted. The loneliness during this period was crushing in ways I still don't have words for. Friday nights, I'd hear people laughing and talking on the street outside my studio apartment, heading to bars in Fremont or house parties in Wallingford, living the kind of carefree 25-year-old life I'd thought I was building. And I'd be inside studying the elements of defamation law or drafting practice complaints on legal pads I bought in bulk from Office Depot. I'd scroll through Instagram and see acquaintances from college posting about their engagements and their promotions and their weekend trips to the San Juan Islands, and I'd feel the gap between their lives and mine like a physical ache. My therapist at Mindful Healing Center, a kind older man named Dr. Chen, who charged me $30 a session instead of his usual rate, kept reminding me that healing isn't linear, and that comparing my inside to everyone else's outside was a recipe for despair. But knowing something intellectually doesn't make the feeling go away. There were moments when I almost gave up the whole plan. I'd see him sometimes, Seattle being smaller than you'd think when you're trying to avoid someone. And once I spotted him at Whole Foods in Roosevelt with a new girlfriend, a brunette who laughed at something he said and touched his arm in that unconscious way you do when you trust someone completely. And I had to leave my half-full shopping cart and walk out before the panic attack fully hit. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, breathing into my hands, thinking about how easy it would be to just let it all go, to stop fighting and accept that sometimes the bad guys win and good people get crushed, and there's no cosmic justice waiting at the end. But then I'd think about Amanda and Rebecca and Jennifer, about the pattern he'd established and would continue unless someone stopped him. And I'd remember Patricia telling me that silence is complicity. and that the system only works if people are brave enough to use it. The legal process moved slower than anything I'd ever experienced. Patricia filed the initial complaint in King County Superior Court 4 months after he'd changed those locks, and his response was to hire an expensive attorney from a downtown firm called Morrison and Associates, who immediately tried to get the case dismissed on technical grounds. We spent weeks filing responses and attending preliminary hearings in the courthouse downtown, sitting in those sterile hallways that smell like floor wax and stale coffee, and I'd watch him sitting on the opposite side with his lawyer, looking annoyed and inconvenienced rather than guilty. And I'd have to grip Patricia's arm to keep from screaming at him across the marble floors. His attorney tried to paint me as the aggressor, pulling the same mental instability narrative he'd used on social media. But we had my therapy records and my work performance reviews and sworn statements from 3 other women. And slowly, hearing by hearing, the judge started to see through his lies. If this story is resonating with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel, and make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss the final part. Leave a comment saying this is an inspiring tale of justice and let me know you're here supporting this journey with me. The discovery process was where everything started to shift in our favor. Patricia subpoenaed his bank records and email accounts and phone records, and what we found was damning in ways even I hadn't fully anticipated. He'd been planning to kick me out for at least a month before he actually did it, transferring money out of our joint account in small increments that he thought I wouldn't notice, searching online for storage facilities and locksmith services, even consulting with an attorney about the legal risks of an illegal eviction, which meant he knew exactly what he was doing was wrong and did it anyway. We found emails to friends where he'd joked about getting rid of me, using language that was cruel and dismissive and showed clear consciousness of guilt. We found text messages to the new girlfriend that started 2 weeks before he changed the locks, which contradicted his claim that our relationship had ended organically, and proved he'd been cheating while still living with me and using my money to pay his half of the rent. The private investigator Patricia hired, a retired cop named Mike Sullivan who ran a small firm called Sullivan Investigations out of an office in Georgetown, found even more. He interviewed neighbors from our old building who confirmed they'd seen him moving my stuff out in garbage bags while I was at work, who'd heard him on the phone bragging about teaching his crazy ex a lesson. He pulled records showing the storage unit had been paid for with money from our joint account, which meant I'd technically paid for my own eviction. He documented every social media post and every public statement, building a comprehensive record of defamation that would be impossible to deny. Every piece of evidence felt like validation, proof that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive or any of the things he'd tried to make me believe about myself. The panic attack came the night before we were scheduled for a settlement conference, a last-ditch attempt to resolve things without going to trial. I'd been fine all day, serving lunch rushes at the Copper Kettle and studying contract law in the break room. But when I got home to my studio apartment and tried to review my testimony notes, something inside me just broke. My chest got tight and my hands started shaking and I couldn't catch my breath. And suddenly I was back in that hallway outside our old apartment, back in my car behind the Denny's, back in every moment when I'd felt small and powerless and erased. I called Patricia in a panic and she talked me through it with the patience of someone who'd been there herself, reminding me that fear was normal, that what I was doing was hard and brave and necessary, that the woman having a panic attack in a studio apartment was not the same woman who'd cried in that storage unit 6 months ago. Doctor Chen and I had an emergency session the next morning before the settlement conference, and he helped me understand that this moment of terror was actually progress, that my nervous system was finally processing trauma it had been too busy surviving to feel. He reminded me that closure doesn't come from apologies or explanations from the people who hurt us, that waiting for him to acknowledge what he'd done was giving him power over my healing that he didn't deserve and had never earned. He told me that justice and healing were separate processes, that I could get one without the other, and that pursuing legal accountability didn't mean I was still emotionally dependent on the outcome. Something about that distinction finally clicked, and I walked into that settlement conference at the King County Courthouse with a clarity I hadn't had before, ready to fight, not because I needed his validation, but because what he'd done was wrong, and someone needed to say it out loud. The settlement conference was held in a windowless room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs, and a mediator who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. He sat across from me with his expensive attorney, and this was the first time we'd been in the same room since he'd told me he'd file for a restraining order if I didn't stop harassing him. And I watched him try to use the same charm that had worked on me 2 years ago, the same easy smile and reasonable tone, and I felt nothing. Patricia presented our evidence methodically, bank records and emails and sworn statements and documented lies, and I watched his face change as he realized how thoroughly we'd dismantled his narrative. His attorney tried to negotiate down from our demands, offering nuisance settlement amounts that were insulting given the documented harm. But Patricia had prepared me for this, and we held firm. We weren't there to make this easy for him. We were there to establish accountability, and if he wanted to avoid trial, then he'd meet our terms, or we'd see him in court. He broke first, which shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow did. His attorney called for a break, and they stepped into the hallway, and when they came back 20 minutes later, he looked defeated in a way I'd never seen, shoulders slumped and eyes avoiding mine, and his lawyer said they were prepared to accept our settlement terms pending some minor modifications. Patricia negotiated those modifications down to nothing, and suddenly we had an agreement, signed and notarized and legally binding, that included full financial compensation for the money he'd stolen and the property he'd damaged, a public retraction of every false statement he'd made about my mental health, a formal apology to be posted on his social media accounts for 30 days, and an agreement that he'd never contact me again under penalty of additional damages. It wasn't everything I'd wanted. Some part of me still wanted him to grovel and beg and truly understand what he'd done, but it was justice in the only form the law could provide. And as I walked out of that courthouse with a settlement check in my purse and a signed agreement in Patricia's briefcase, I felt something shift inside me that I'd thought was permanently broken. Which brings me back to this moment, standing outside his door 6 months to the day after he changed those locks and threw my life into garbage bags like it meant nothing. The settlement conference was 3 weeks ago, and he's had time to post the public apology and make the financial transfers. But there's one final piece of business that Patricia suggested I handle personally, a delivery of additional legal documents regarding the terms of our agreement and the consequences of any future violations. She offered to send them by courier, but I told her I wanted to do this myself, that I needed to see his face one more time, not as the broken woman begging for explanations, but as the woman who'd fought back and won. So here I am in my black suit from Nordstrom Rack that I bought with my first settlement payment, holding a leather briefcase I found at a consignment shop in Ballard, my hair styled sharp and professional, my makeup subtle but polished, looking nothing like the girl who used to make him blueberry pancakes on Saturday mornings, in an apartment that feels like it belonged to someone else's life. I ring the doorbell and wait, listening to footsteps approach from inside, and my heart is steady in a way it hasn't been in months. The door opens, and there he is, wearing sweatpants and a faded Seahawks t-shirt, looking comfortable and casual in his space, and for a split second he doesn't recognize me. His eyes scan my face with polite confusion, the way you look at a stranger selling something or collecting signatures for a petition, and then recognition hits him like cold water, and his expression shifts through surprise and confusion, and something that looks almost like fear. He takes a half step back and his hand tightens on the doorframe, and I can see him trying to process what he's seeing, trying to reconcile the woman standing in front of him with the woman he thought he'd destroyed 6 months ago. "You look just like," he starts to say, and then stops, because he's realized exactly who I am, and the sentence hangs unfinished in the air between us while I wait patiently for him to complete his thought. His mouth opens and closes, and he runs a hand through his hair in that nervous gesture I used to find endearing back when I didn't understand it was a tell for when he was lying or uncomfortable, or caught in something he couldn't talk his way out of. I let the silence stretch because I've learned that silence is a weapon when you know how to use it, that people will fill empty space with confessions and excuses and all sorts of truths they never meant to tell. "I'm her lawyer," I say finally, my voice calm and professional and completely devoid of the emotion that used to flood every interaction we had. The lie is technically accurate since I've been working as Patricia's paralegal for the past month, helping her with other cases while I study for the LSAT, and the confusion on his face deepens as he tries to understand what's happening. I watch him glance down at my briefcase and then back at my face and then over my shoulder, like he's checking to see if anyone else is here, if this is some kind of setup or prank or situation he needs to be worried about beyond the immediate discomfort of having me on his doorstep. "We need to discuss some clarifications regarding the settlement agreement," I continue before he can find his voice, and I open the briefcase and pull out a folder containing documents that Patricia and I prepared specifically for this moment. His attorney should have explained the monitoring provisions, but I'm here to ensure you understand the consequences of any violations. I hand him the folder and he takes it automatically, his hands shaking slightly in a way that gives me more satisfaction than it probably should, and I start listing the terms in the same professional tone I've been practicing in mock negotiations at the paralegal program. Any contact with me through social media, email, phone, or third parties constitutes a violation worth $10,000 per incident. Any new defamatory statements, public or private, constitute violations worth $25,000 per statement. Any failure to maintain the public apology for the required 30-day period constitutes a violation worth $50,000. He's staring at me now with an expression I can't quite read, something between anger and disbelief, and maybe a hint of the charm he used to deploy whenever he needed to manipulate a situation back in his favor. "Come on," he says, and his voice has that reasonable tone he always used when he wanted me to feel like I was being unreasonable. "This is ridiculous. We settled everything. You got your money. Why are you still doing this?" It's not a question. It's an accusation wrapped in false casualness, and I recognize the tactic because he used it on me 1,000 times during our relationship, making me feel crazy for having boundaries, or asking questions, or expecting basic respect. "I'm doing this because the settlement agreement requires it," I say, and I don't take the bait. Don't let any personal emotion leak into my professional demeanor, even though standing this close to him is harder than I expected it to be. My body remembers things my mind has tried to forget. The specific way he smells like coffee and that expensive cologne from Macy's. The sound of his voice when he's trying to sound reasonable while actually being manipulative. The way he shifts his weight when he's about to lie. But I'm not the same person who responded to those cues with anxiety and self-doubt. I'm someone different now. Someone who's been through fire and came out forged into something harder. He tries a different approach, leaning against the doorframe in a posture that's meant to look relaxed, but reads as defensive. "Look, I know I messed up, okay?" he says. And there's the beginning of what might be an attempt at an apology, or might just be another manipulation. But don't you think this has gone far enough? All the legal stuff and the public posts, and now showing up at my door? I mean, we used to care about each other, and now you're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal. He emphasizes the word criminal like it's absurd, like what he did was just a relationship ending badly, rather than a systematic campaign to destroy my housing stability and my reputation and my financial security. "What you did was criminal," I say quietly, and I let the word hang there between us without softening it or taking it back. Illegal eviction is a crime in Washington state. Financial exploitation is a crime. Defamation that causes material harm is a civil offense with criminal elements. You knew what you were doing was wrong because we found the emails where you researched the legal risks, and you did it anyway because you thought I was too broken to fight back. I watch his face change as he realizes I'm not here to be charmed or manipulated or convinced that my anger is an overreaction. I'm here as someone who knows the law and knows her rights and isn't going to be gaslit into accepting less than what she deserves. His girlfriend appears behind him in the hallway, the same brunette I saw at Whole Foods, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater and looking confused about who's at the door and why her boyfriend looks like he's seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" she asks, and her voice is sweet and trusting and completely unaware that she's probably the next chapter in a story that's already been written 3 times before with 3 other women who all thought they were special, who all thought they were different, who all learned the hard way that patterns don't break themselves. I meet her eyes, and for a moment I consider warning her, telling her exactly who she's dating and what he's capable of when the charm wears off, but that's not my place, and she probably wouldn't believe me anyway because he's already spent months building his version of events where I'm the crazy ex who won't let go. "Everything's fine," he tells her, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "Just some legal paperwork from the settlement. She'll be leaving now." He emphasizes the last part while looking at me, a dismissal that would have worked 6 months ago when I was still afraid of his anger and his rejection and his ability to make me feel small. But I've learned that the only power he ever had over me was the power I gave him. And I'm not giving him anything anymore except exactly what the law requires, and not 1 ounce more of my energy or my emotion or my time. If you're watching this and feeling empowered by this transformation, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you catch every update, and comment below with strength and justice prevail to show your support for standing up and fighting back. "I actually came to give you something else too," I say, and I reach into my briefcase and pull out a second envelope, this one personal rather than legal. It's a letter I wrote in Dr. Chen's office during our last session, a letter that I needed to write for myself more than for him. And Patricia suggested I include it with the legal documents as a form of closure that belongs to me rather than to the court system. The envelope is sealed and I can see him hesitate before taking it, like he's worried it might explode or contain something that will make the situation even more complicated than it already is. "You don't have to read it," I tell him, and I mean it. "You can throw it away the second I leave, and it won't change anything about the legal requirements or the settlement or the fact that what you did was wrong. But I wrote it because I needed to. because there were things I never got to say when you changed those locks and erased me from your life like I never mattered, and whether you read them or not doesn't change the fact that I said them. The letter contains all the things I couldn't articulate when I was still in survival mode. The hurt and the anger and the grief and ultimately the gratitude, because his betrayal forced me to become someone stronger than I ever would have been if he just treated me with basic human decency. He takes the envelope and I watch something shift in his expression, maybe the first genuine emotion I've seen from him since I rang the doorbell. For a second, he looks like he might actually apologize. Really apologize with the kind of accountability that acknowledges harm and takes responsibility. But then his girlfriend calls his name from inside the apartment asking who's at the door, and the moment passes, and his face hardens back into defensive annoyance. I step back from the doorway and adjust the briefcase in my hand, and prepare to walk away from this chapter of my life for the last time. You know what the worst part is? I say before I turn to go, and it's the first time I've let any personal feeling leak into my professional tone. The worst part isn't what you did to me. It's that you've done it before and you'll probably do it again because people like you don't change. You just find new victims who don't know your patterns yet. I hope she's smarter than I was. I hope she sees the warning signs before you isolate her from her friends and take control of her finances and make her feel crazy for having boundaries. But if she's not, if you do to her what you did to me and Amanda and Rebecca and Jennifer, just know that the legal precedent is set now, and it'll be a lot easier for her to fight back because I already did the heavy lifting. I don't wait for his response. I just turn and walk down the hallway toward the elevator, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors that I used to mop on Saturday mornings, past the neighbor's door where I once stood crying and begging to be let back into my own home, past the building manager's office where Sandra handed me that storage unit key with pity in her eyes. The elevator arrives and I step inside and press the button for the ground floor and watch the doors close on his face. On this building. On the entire life I thought I was building that turned out to be built on sand. The descent feels symbolic in a way that's almost too perfect, like I'm literally leaving that version of myself behind in the upper floors and emerging on ground level as someone completely different. My car is parked on the street outside, the same old Honda Civic I slept in during the worst weeks, but now it just feels like transportation rather than a symbol of everything I'd lost. I get in and set the briefcase on the passenger seat and sit there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, processing what just happened. And I realize I'm not shaking or crying or feeling any of the things I thought I'd feel during this confrontation. I feel calm. I feel complete. I feel like I've closed a door that needed closing, not because I got the apology I wanted, but because I've proven to myself that I didn't need it, that I could seek justice and healing independently of whether he ever acknowledged the harm he caused. I drive to Patricia's office in downtown Seattle, navigating the late afternoon traffic on I-5 with the kind of patience I didn't used to have. And when I get there, she's waiting with champagne she bought from the wine shop on Pike Street. We toast in her conference room overlooking Elliott Bay, and she tells me she's proud of me not just for pursuing the case, but for doing the hard work of healing alongside it, for understanding that legal victory and personal peace are related but separate achievements. She's offered me a permanent position as her paralegal while I study for law school, helping other women fight similar battles, and the idea of turning my worst experience into something that helps others feels like the kind of redemption I didn't know was possible 6 months ago. That night, I go home to my studio apartment in Greenwood, the one with the water-stained ceiling and the clanking radiator that I've slowly made into something cozy, with plants from Pike Place Market and artwork from local artists selling prints at the Fremont Sunday Market. I heat up leftover Thai food from my favorite place on Greenwood Avenue, and I sit at my desk where I've spent so many nights studying law and building my case, and I take out the copy of the letter I gave him, the one I wrote for myself as much as for him. It talks about betrayal and survival and the unexpected gifts that come from being forced to rebuild yourself from nothing. It talks about learning to distinguish between closure that comes from other people and closure that comes from within. It talks about forgiveness not as something you give to the person who hurt you, but as something you give to yourself so you can stop carrying their weight. I read it through one more time, and then I fold it carefully and put it in a box with all the other documents from this chapter of my life, the settlement agreement, and the bank statements, and the court filings, and the therapy notes. Everything that tells the story of how I went from sleeping in my car behind a Denny's to standing in a black suit outside his door demanding accountability. Someday I'll look back at this box and barely remember the pain. I'll just remember that I survived it and that the surviving made me stronger. Someday this whole experience will just be a story I tell to other women who are going through their own betrayals, proof that you can be broken completely and still rebuild yourself into something more powerful than you were before. The woman looking back at me from the bathroom mirror as I brush my teeth before bed is not the same woman who stood in that hallway 6 months ago with groceries in her arms and confusion in her heart. She has sharper eyes and a harder jaw, and a confidence that comes from having survived the worst thing she could imagine and discovering she was capable of fighting back. She's enrolled in law school starting next fall. She's helping other women navigate legal systems that weren't designed to protect them. She's building a life that belongs entirely to her, free from anyone who would try to diminish or control or erase her. She's 25 years old and she's been through hell, and she came out the other side holding fire in her hands, ready to light the way for whoever comes next. He thought changing the locks would erase me from his life, would rewrite our story so completely that it would be like I never existed at all. Instead, he unlocked something inside me that I never knew was there, some core of strength and determination and righteous anger that refused to be silenced or dismissed or forgotten. The woman he destroyed became the woman he could never touch, and that transformation is worth more than any settlement check or court victory or public apology. I don't need his acknowledgement anymore because I have my own. I've acknowledged my own worth and my own strength and my own capacity to survive anything that tries to break me. And that, finally, is the closure I was looking for all along. Not in his words or his actions, but in my own mirror, in my own choices, in my own refusal to disappear quietly into the narrative someone else wrote for me. I am the author of my own story now, and this chapter ends not with his redemption, but with mine.